Welcome back, all my 40K fanatics out there. I'm DJ here with Tim's Nation, and today I want to do another farewell to ninth video and talk about a time in 40K early on in the edition where two armies really dominated the scene. And I want to talk about this in kind of the form of a story because I was lucky enough to luck into, however you want to quantify it. I had the opportunity to take Brutal Broken Admech to a GT, a major actually, and it was an interesting experience for the least. Being able to be, a lot of times we're playing into the meta, and every once in a while, depending on what book is out and what time you're able to go, you are the meta. And this was one time that I got to walk into a tournament and be the meta. Guys, thanks you for tuning into the channel. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do. Turn on the bell for notifications to get notified on more of this content, as well as our weekly battle reports. Going to keep recording them all the way up until 10th because I want to harness and refine the product I'm putting out there so I can keep growing. This is by nowhere means the final product that I'm going to be putting out there. And as I learn more and we grow, I'm just going to keep trying to enhance the channel as much as I can. With that being said, let's get over into Admech. So a little bit of backstory on what had occurred. Right now, with the way the game was set up and the secondaries that we had available, darkeldar Codex hits, and they are now running the meta. darkeldar had very cheap, very fast units that could advance and charge very early off the game for their power through pain, and also had access to cheap transports that could protect these soft units and move them into a better position very early on in the game. darkeldar armies were not necessarily tabling people, but they were outscoring everybody, which now what we know as retrieved battlefield data at the time was called R&D, retrieved Nachman data, I believe. I'm sorry if I got that wrong. But the issues were, at the time, if you look at retrieve battlefield data now, you have to be more than 6 inches from another table quarter, and in a table quarter that you have not already completed data on, and then you still have to roll a dice. And if you have less than 5 guys in your unit, you roll for a dice and you have to roll equal to or less than the number of models in the unit, subtracting 1 if the unit is a troop. So if you have a 5-man troop squad, cool, you complete it, no fail. But if you have a 5-man anything else, you have to roll a dice and pray you don't hit a 6. One time you don't want to hit a 6. So, or you take bigger squads. Now where this really gets rough with it is, if you want to try and complete that secondary with a 1-man squad, a single last looming model, you need to roll a 1 in order to pass that. That wasn't the time for R&D. R&D, you only needed to be wholly within the table quarter, cutting the distance down significantly. On top of that, anyone could do it at any point. Any infantry or unit could do it. Non-character, I do believe, could do it without fail. So unit gets beat up, you got 2 models left, you go run away for a couple of turns, sneak into your opponent's deployment zone and do R&D, and now you've scored 12 points, almost a guaranteed 12 points. And darkeldar, it was a guaranteed 12 points. Stranglehold was another mission that we were playing with a lot in that time frame, which Stranglehold was basically hold 3 and more, hold at least half and more. And I do apologize if I got that one wrong, because Stranglehold changed a lot from how it has been, and it's been one that we've seen a couple different names for it, but basically it was holding objectives. So you were getting rewarded for your secondaries for playing the game, for doing what you were trying to do, and that's hold more objectives than your opponent. And that led to a lot of higher scores that Games Workshop wanted to try and avoid, which is where we went forward after it with how R&D turned into RODS, retrieve Octarius data, and actually I think that's what it was. It was RODS. It was retrieve Octarius data, then it went to retrieve Nachman data. So I'm sorry if I said that. I mixed those two up. And now we've gone down the line, and now we are at retrieve battlefield data. So that one has evolved a lot because of over consistency of scoring it. Stranglehold has changed its name, changed how it was because of over consistency of scoring. Darkeldar was new at the time when they could consistently score that every single game, every single army, because we don't have a lot of codexes. And aside from Custodes, a lot of armies weren't doing well off indexes. So now we move forward. And and this was a time when Necrons, nothing had core. I don't understand from the get-go why Flayed ones never had core. I understand they're kind of different, but they're basically Necron warriors. I don't understand why they didn't have core right off the bat. Anyways, regardless of that, thank you for my little 2-second rant. Let's go from one robot unit to the other robot units. The Adeptus Mechanicus, or AdMech, as I'm going to refer to them for the rest of the video. Their codex drops, and hoo-wee. One of the reasons I don't play AdMech very much on the channel is AdMech is a very, very complicated army. Anyone who plays this army will agree. You have a lot of very intricate details that you can put in there. And at this time in the game, we had a lot more command points than we do now. At this time, you had the command points to spend on all these pre-game stuff because we hadn't cut the command points in half yet. So with this army, the first thing was, for one command point, you could give a Skitarii sergeant, or the veteran, the little alpha, as I believe he's called, of each of your Skitarii Ranger squads or your Vanguard squads. You could give him a Warlord trait. And because those Warlord traits were Skitarii Warlord traits, that didn't prevent you from still the Warlord traits that you could take out of Mechanicus for your Dominus. And there was a relic, there is still a relic, for your Marshal that you give him. His ability is he gives up an aura of reroll ones to hit. I'm sorry, to wound. When you give him a relic, now he rerolls ones to hit as well. You just put him with Skitarii units and they're just rerolling ones to hit and wound all game long. And on top of it, the Rangers and the Vanguard were just decimating people. The Rangers could easily take their guns, which were heavy too, and suddenly turn them into rapid fire. And when you're moving up on an objective for hidden Archaeovault, and these guys go rushing up there with 30-inch range guns, at 15, you're shelling out 4 shots a guy. And most likely, at this point, if you timed out your doctrines right, or Doctrina, if you timed out your Doctrina right, you're hitting on 2s. Hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s. You can boost the strength off your Manipulus. There's holy orders that you can take to boost the abilities on these guns even further. A Ranger squad could shred anything in the game at that time. And then if it happened to be too big and too tough, your Vanguard could automatically wound it on 4, 5s, and 6s, and they're hitting on 2s, and they're re-rolling, and. Those 2 units alone as basic troops, and they went up to 20, man. They went from 10 to 20. The squads were bigger. The command points were being invested more into these units with ease. You're spending 2 command points on 20 guys, 20 Rangers that are going to get rapid fire 2 on their guns. You know, the amount that you needed to invest wasn't that bad. But, and this is not pun intended, it is a machine to pilot. There are so many working parts for where you have to position things, to what abilities you have out there, especially now with this command point reduction. AdMech loses a lot of that, even without the veteran cohort. Just the codex alone. The codex alone, you lose a lot of that to be able to buff. And you kind of, whenever I'm playing AdMech or trying to prepare them, I go through all the Warlord traits, all the relics and stuff, and I have them on cards. And I start shuffling through and I go, okay, with this list, what do I really need? And I start separating them in yes, no, yes, no. Then I go back through the 7 that I put in yes column and go, okay, I got 3 command points I can really invest on this. And that's me. I look at it and go, I want 3 into it. Which ones of these am I keeping? So kind of went off on a tangent for what AdMech now is. But when you look at AdMech then, none of this was an issue. You had command points for days. So armies were really built bulky with a lot of defensive buffs and a lot of cool command phase stuff that the rest of the game had not even seen yet. The only ones that could even come close to competing was Custodes, because they're not index armies. They're predecessor codexes that were moving into it, Custodes was still, I want to say busted because it wasn't cleaning and winning GTs, but the way they functioned was kind of busted. As you could see the direction of where the game was going, they had a lot of old rules, like we weren't into core yet. So there was a lot of like Telemon could get a buff because they didn't have that same core restriction yet. I mean, Telemon, I believe, got core anyways. But there's different, the tanks, the Caladius, those ones, they could get buffs that now you can't. So we get this AdMech Codex, it drops, and this machine falls in our lap. And a couple of things that people noticed right off rip, and a couple popular things were the Skitarii Rangers, as I've said, what they could do at that time. The Vanguard, we talked about them. Taraxi and Sicarian Infiltrator and Taraxi Sterilizers were popular choices as well. Taking in a 5-man, taking in a 5-man, taking a 10-man, there was a lot of combinations. There were some cool strats that interacted with the Infiltrators. At this time, the more common was 5 and 5 on both the Taraxi and the Infiltrators because of retrieve Octarius data, rods. Taraxi can leave the table, Infiltrators can leave the table, Infiltrators can forward deploy. There's a lot of working pieces with them. They're super cheap, they're super strong. Taraxi can advance and shoot their guns all days because they have assault weapons and they're flamers, so they're great for that. Just so much viability, so much around those guys in such a cheap package. And now I did see, at that time too, we did see Taraxi into a single transport, because having Taraxi be able to get out that extra 3 inches and make such a crushing move, a 10-man Taraxi out of a transport was a brutal combo as well. But typically, I felt like there was a lot more with the 5-mans just because of how fast they were and versatile they were. There is the Dog Riders. Their ability to, I'm going to charge you, no, I'm going to move, I'm going to spend a command point, and now I move away from you, was really big, especially because they could get out in front of your army and kind of wall out and keep your opponent back for a bit. I'm not a big fan of them. I'm not a big fan of the model, to be honest. And then the big brutal. We got Dragoons got core, which meant Iron Striders got core. And Iron Striders getting core had las cannons. And they had Eradication of Flesh, which Eradication of Flesh was different at that time, where you just needed to destroy more units than your opponent destroys vehicle units. So you take them, you hide them in the back, you shoot down the ways, and you just score points on killing units easily. And these guys are getting all of the full reroll buffs. They're going to 2s to hit. Their guns are getting extra AP, whatever you may want, because they have core. So, and then the other one, I think Dune, we saw a little bit with the Dune Riders, the Scorpius tanks. Their artillery at the time was still decent, but I think then after they weren't as good as they were in the previous edition. Their artillery was still strong, but them not having core, it kind of weakens them a little bit, where there was so much extra strength and cost behind things like the Vanguard and the Rangers that it was worth more to invest into them and the Iron Striders for the direct, just punch something and hit it hard and get it off the table quickly. For me, I went a little different route. And one thing that was kind of a common pick and one that was an uncommon pick. I ran the Rangers, I ran the Rangers, I ran the Vanguard, I ran the Infiltrators, all that stuff was there. Dominus, Marshall, Data Smith for the robots. 5 Castellan robots. 3 of them punchy, 2 of them shooty. I was coming out of Lucius. Lucius was the dogma that got nerfed after this GT and now is unnerfed. At the time, what you can do now, for a while you could not stack your cover and your other buffs to be able to get yourself to a 2-up save. And that got nerfed. so that got nerfed to the fact of not being able to buff it that high. And now we're back coming around that it's been removed, that now you can play Lucius as the codex is written. Because it's not as powerful as it was at the early part of the edition, where guns didn't have the type of AP they do now. And I remember many, many times where my Rangers would go like 2 turns where you just couldn't touch them really. That with Lucius also having instant transhuman at the beginning of the ground. In the command phase, you select a unit and basically give them transhuman physiology. So now they're able to a Ranger squad that's toughness 3 is able to just wall anything. Your las cannon's wounding it on a 4. Doesn't matter. So that was with the dogmas, and that was one of the popular ones. Also, a lot with the veteran cohort. Mars out of veteran cohort was really powerful too. I remember this of GT, I just slid past Thomas Ogden and his ad mech before he went on a warpath with them. But needless to say, I took Castellan robots out for Lucius so I could be able to deep strike them. And then you pick the Catacomb of Amasaya. That gives you 3d6 charge, pick the 2 highest. And then you spend a command point to pop them over the binaric override to put them in their charge. So now they're hitting on 2s, and they get to reroll failed charge. I was fine trying to stick that 9 on a 3d6, and I loved it when I could hit it. Plus, at the same time, a lot of games, I never even used it. I sat back there, the Data Smith wandered around behind them, stayed by them, had some Rangers and Vanguard moving up there, always threatening the fact that I could deep strike these robots cross field 9 inches away, anywhere I wanted at any time. And then I pick up the Rangers, go move them in the corner and score routes. And go, okay, I'll score this, now I score 12, and I'll take a knee. Because now we go back to Eradication of Flesh. Eradication of Flesh required me to destroy more of my enemy units than they destroy vehicle units. All 5 of those robots are 1 unit. So in order for you to even get 1 killed unit against whatever I may kill, you have to take out all 5 of them. And also they went up to 7 wounds. At that time, 7 wounds was super important because it meant that there was realistically no guns in the game, no real weapons in the game that could take them out in 1 hit. And if there was, they were extremely, extremely few and far between, or a super melter range or something like that. But for the most part, it took you 2 hits to take 1 robot out. So they were really tough. And also, I can't admit one of the silliest rules in all of 40K that I'm so glad, and I so hope this doesn't go away in 10th edition. Whenever you take a hit from in the shooting phase to a Castellan robot, and you make it have to take an invulnerable save, which is a 5-up. If when you take that invulnerable save, you roll a 6 for that save, the shooting unit takes a mortal wound. You bounce the bullet back and hit them in the face. And what I love, and this always seems to happen, is it bounces the most ridiculous shots back. I have, in a tournament, been shot by a basilisk from behind a wall and did a mortal wound to it because I bounced the invuln back. So the invuln cleared the tower, hit me, hit my robot at the perfect trajectory to then bounce all the way back and smack his basilisk gun loader in the eye. So, love those guys. Now, the not so meta pick that was my choice was the Dragoons. These are my babies. These are in every ad mech list. I don't care. I take them all the time. I love these guys. And these guys were a huge benefit going into the Dark Eldar matchup for me, and was one thing I planned for. So, Dragoons, unlike Iron Striders, are inherently -1 to hit at all times. It's not dense cover. It's -1 to hit. So things that ignore dense cover do not ignore the -1 for these guys. They went up to a 3-up save, which made them really, really tough with all the different stuff from the Doctrina to be able to boost them. And since they are a data tethered unit, they do not need to be near my Marshal if my Marshal wants to give them the ability to not ignore the downside to the Doctrina. You can do it to them from anywhere on the map. And they had core. They started off with core, which meant they had all sorts of mean stuff. And those of you who don't know with Dragoons have an effect that they have 4 attacks. And if they roll a 6 on one of those attacks, they generate 2 additional attacks, What is a very common thing is to get full rerolls on these guys some way, shape, or form, and you're fishing for those sixes. On top of the fact that you spend one command point, and now it goes to any fives or sixes, generate 2 additional hits. These guys just crank out hits. And then their strength 8, strength 9, AP 2, 2 damage. They were able to pick up a Marine real easy there. There wasn't a lot of crazy Terminators and stuff. They weren't doing anything. Picking up a Marine like nothing. So we take this to the tournament. Game 1 was a 4 objective mission, 1 objective on each side, 2 in the middle. And after practicing with a couple buddies, I said, this is basically an auto win for AdMech. And that's not a healthy game state. That's not a bragging point of it. That's not a healthy game state where I can look at a mission and say, I win this mission when I play it. Reason why was I select Hidden Archaeovault. It has to be one of the 2 objectives in the middle. Right now, AdMech is unnecessarily resilient and cannot really be killed. So once the Hidden Archaeovault is determined, I just crash my whole army on it. Then I play Stranglehold, because now I'm able to just, at the end of my turn, as long as I knock you off of an objective with the rest of my army, I'm scoring all the way through. And then rods for the easy 12. Because again, AdMech this time, like darkeldar, could score that with no problem. The next mission was against Eldar with darkeldar. So the primary force was darkeldar. The Eldar portion of it was 2 Shadow Weavers and a squad of Dark Reapers, which I wasn't anticipating and wasn't expecting from our robot. So it actually ended up being a little bit of a tougher matchup for me with darkeldar than I would have liked to see, especially with some of my vehicles. It basically, I was able to move the infiltrators to the center and draw a line with them, which prevented him from moving forward and moving into me, and then counter with my bigger, tankier units to then take back the center and keep a wall. I can't fully remember what the point of the scoring was, but I do remember the fact that I basically drew a line at middle and did not let him cross. The Shadow Weavers were not that good into me. I was able to stop the Rangers and the Vanguards because of all the defense that they had. The Weavers didn't do very much. The only thing that was really scary was those Dark Reapers for a little bit until the Dragoons were able to sweep through. I had 2 of them left that were able to finally charge and hit the Reapers, and the 2 were enough to pick up the squad. From that point on, the Castellan robots went into God mode. They had the cheat code. There was like 4 of them left, and they were able to just start walking. My last matchup was against Tau. And man, that was a cool list. He was a very good Tau player. Tau were terrible at the time. So it was cool to see it up there. He was running the triple Riptide, and he had some piranhas and stuff. Early on, he came out, hit, scored some points early. My Dragoons were relatively worthless into this matchup, so I put him up behind a piece of terrain and just let him kind of say, if you go here, I will hit you. And he was able to hit them still from afar and whittle them down, but he wasn't able to really go into those zones because until he basically wiped them all out, even 1 Dragoon was a huge threat to his basic infantry as well as his piranhas he was using. So that took time. That took turns off the game for me to set everything up in a better position. I ended up being able to drop the robots in late, and after the first Riptide died, the second one got beat up and was close after, and I was able to put him with 1 Riptide left. He was making it a game. It was just once I could get a hold of one of the Riptides, that was where it fell apart. And that's where Tau struggled at that time, is they really didn't have the defense it was an old codex. They really just didn't have the defense to keep up with where we were going until they got their codex. More on that later. That was day 1. Day 1 went 3 and out. Awesome. Starting off day 2, I'm now getting my second darkeldar matchup. And this one is the meta list. And it was a nice practice for what I get into round 3. And we'll just kind of, I don't want to segue away from that and not show respect. It was a Dawn of War style deployment, so we went long. And it was a tight, close game. A lot of things came down to some dice. Sometimes, I don't ever want to blame dice, but there is some times where that happens. And his was, we were playing, it was tightly contested. He had a 7-inch charge that he needed to make. rolled a 5, CP reroll, rolled a 5. And we both looked at each other, stopped at the game, and I'm like, I didn't want to be that guy. And I didn't want to say, I think that's game. And he's like, yep. And that's when I realized he's seen it too. I was like, I'm pretty sure that that is game. He's like, yeah, I agree. He's like, because you can go here. I'm like, and we just talked out the last little pieces of it because there was things I could do that wouldn't be changed. There was turns I scored primary that already occurred. And that failed charge meant that the unit that survived was actually in his corner on his side of the battlefield and was my final tag for routes and would have been my 12 points. So that was very courteous, good player. That was, had he made the charge, would I still won the game? I don't know. Probably, most likely. I was in a very solid position, but failing that charge at that point in time meant that I was able to walk through with the rest of the points. Last, but certainly not least, was my rematch at this time to face off against the one, the only, the Bradley Chester. So me and the old man get to have a round 2 in a game. And this is where I really got to, after the first game, I was really in a mindset of, okay, I know what Dark Eldar cannot deal with. So this was a table quarter setup. And moving towards the middle, I sent the Dragoons towards the right flank, and I put them on a wall. And I take a lot of compliment to this with something that happened with an interaction with it. The guys who were recording this, and this is available on YouTube, the guys who were recording this game thought that I did not know what to do with the Dragoons because I moved them to the middle. And if you can imagine, way I'm facing you right now, the long ways is the table. Right from center, I had 3 Dragoons. Going straight down to the board edge, I lined up the rest of them. And what this did was I basically created a wall. See, Dark Eldar witches are great at stealing objectives, charging long distances, and again, stealing objectives. Scoring R&D late when 1 or 2 of them is left alive after beating up a squad, they're a glass cannon. However, in order for those witches to get into my vanguard, to get into my other AdMech units, they must first disembark from their transport. And when they disembark from their transport, they are now foot infantry, which means they have to go into the Dragoons. And one thing that they cannot handle is the Dragoons in combat. The Dragoons would have picked them up and not even cared. So until those Dragoons moved, until I got them out of the way, he was shut off from that flank. And we were able to go north. And we were able to fight this game north. This was a very, very tight game. We only made it to turn 4 onto this, and I'm not really sure why. We were playing pretty quick, but stuff happens. And that's why I was like, me and him both were kind of like, that's weird. That felt like that flew by. But regardless, it was a really, really heavy, close game. Early on, there was one turn that Brad actually put me at a 5 on primary. And the reason why was he stuck a 9-inch charge with his witches. I got out of a transport, stuck the charge, killed the unit, and knocked me off an objective. Final score, Brad 88, DJ 84. That one charge was the difference between a win and a loss at a major GT. I was heartbroken. But if you're going to go to the end, and you're going to play that way, and it's going to be that close, that's the way you want to lose. You want to lose on that where you're both trying to do stuff. Because I guarantee there was probably a couple of times that maybe I had an 8-inch charge. It might not have been as impactful as his, but I hit it and I cleared it and kept the score in there. I don't remember all of my dice. I remember that one. I remember that one because it took so much of my primaries away. But man, if you're going to lose a game, lose it like that's the way you want to lose it. Final round, epic conclusion, not one-sided at all, down to the wire. Final score 88-84. So afterwards, we go in and we talk about it with the Death or Glory guys, and we're hanging out there and talking about the game. And one thing that they asked him was, did it seem like David didn't know what to do with the Dragoons? And Brad was surprised. He's like, oh no, man, those things, that was insane. He's like, because at one point he charges Hellions in, like, a couple of them live. I popped the strat, propped the strat, swung back, and bam, basically picked up all of the Skyboarders. If he didn't, oh, that was the other one. He needs to roll a 1 to stick the leadership or they're gone, and he sticks a 1. And I'm like, what do you do? What do you do? I stuck a 5 to blow up a Land Raider, so there's mine. But needless to say, he recognized the fact that I put up a wall into it. And that was really kind of a cool thing to see, and a cool moment where it's like, outside looking in, it's like, I guess doesn't know what he's doing there. But it was a critical move block that I was able to read into, and I was really happy with. There's times where we make really epic plays, and we should be proud of them, where you're like, oh man, I was looking across the map, I saw this opening, and it led into this, and you get those reads on it. I'm a person who comes from a sports background, so when you're on, you're on. And man, that was one time I was on. Sucks I didn't get the win out of it, but hey, I put up one heck of a fight. And that was the end for AdMech at that point. Shortly after, the AdMech would get nerfed, and their win rate would significantly decrease, and it would continue to decrease. The veteran cohort still gave them power because they still had Mars veteran cohorts. They were able to stick with it. But the Iron Striders were taken out. They're not taken out. They lost core. Dragoons lost core. The army got hit. They still had the veteran cohort, though. And for me personally, I didn't want to play the veteran cohort. I play AdMech, not Ad Skitarii. I will use Skitarii units. I like Skitarii units, but I like the machines of AdMech. And I don't feel like they do enough for those. You have very, very few. We have the priests, which are technically, of the Mechanicus units, are like the priests, Castellan robots, Cataphrone destroyers, and breachers. Going through the rest, I believe that's it. I think that I named them all. And if I miss, like the Dominus and those characters, yes. But I'm saying like units wise, that's really it. Servitors, we got servitors. So there's not there's not that much into it. There's a lot of Skitarii. There's a whole bunch of Skitarii. So that was AdMech at that time. That was how it felt going into a GT, and trying to being able to pilot this army. That yes, you walk onto a table and you're like, should I just check that I score 12 now, or 15 on this or that? And it was the way it was. Primaries were scored a lot heavier. So now AdMech's coming back. We're going to see, coming back. AdMech is going to be getting their preview. Hopefully at the time of this video, it might already be out, and I'm flipping through it already. Don't know really what to expect. AdMech has been kind of a different view on it, and multiple editions. Different units have been powerful and bounced around. So I guess the only thing I really want to see is destroyers and breachers be good again. They were really kind of bad this edition. I tried very hard to make them work, but destroyers and breachers were kind of a loss. They tried, but in the end, didn't really matter. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video and just enjoying a trip down memory lane with me on one of the tournaments that I went to, and being able to pilot the big star, pilot the big ship, and have that meta breaking army at that time was a lot of fun. It's a different experience. A lot of times I'm on the other side of it. We're trying to beat the meta breaking army. Yes, I played Necrons when they were vicious, but I was also pretty much playing Necrons for the duration of 9th edition, with small times I would stop off at AdMech or Grey Knights when they got a book, and they were fun to play for a little while. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I plan on making a couple more before we see 10th edition, because there's a few other things to cover, like when Tau went on for Rampage. That's one that I've kind of teased at in here, so we have that as well. And yeah, thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you guys again soon.